All right. How are you doing today, Bart?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Brian?
Great. So, for people that aren't familiar with you, why don't you start by giving a little background about yourself? And then from there, I have a few questions that I wanted to ask to get us started.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you don't know who I am, where have you been? For goodness sake, I'm everywhere. No, that's fine if you haven't heard of me before. There are certain parts of the establishment out there that probably don't want me to be heard so much. YouTube, those kind of places, but that's for another day. I used to be an academic for several decades. I taught three different specializations and researched three different specializations as an independent scientist during those 2 decades. Those were the physiology of rest and exercise, used to be called sports science, human nutrition, and cardiovascular pathophysiology. So, what causes heart disease and what doesn't? All of that is overarched by a pretty good understanding of statistics, statistical inference, research methodology, ethics, all that kind of bizzo. So basically, I used to be a scientist and now I'm a social media influencer instead because, well, this is much more fun. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, Brian, all yours.
First question I wanted to ask you has to do with protein and fat intake. Um, how is the best way to calculate both of those?
Right. If you are a person who needs a guide stone, a touchstone, a somewhere to start, then you might use this. Because everything I say in these kind of discussions always has to be with respect to that high point in the bell-shaped curve. I have to talk about these folks. So everything is geared towards the middle. What I'm saying is your mileage will vary. You might need a bit more than this. You might need a bit less than this. You might have to do n equals one experimentation on yourself to kind of suss it. But let's start in the middle. Okay. I always say to people that what you ideally need as a human being is somewhere around about 2 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body mass. So, to give you an example of how that works in the real world, using non-freedom units that we like to use on this side of the planet, you can make conversions for yourselves if you really want to. But my height is 5'6", which is 1.68 meters. What I do is I take 1.68 meters and divide that by itself, multiply it by itself, not divide it by, we square it, times 1.68. Right. That gives us 2.8224. Now, to work out my ideal weight in kilograms from that, what I need to do is multiply that number by the ideal body mass, which is so-called 25. Assuming I'm a male of European descent, so not African or Asian or, that kind of stuff, and that I'm normally muscled, not hugely muscled or hugely under muscled. So there's a lot of assumptions, but okay, 25. That gives us 63.5 kilograms is my ideal body mass for my height. So 1.68 meters times 1.68 meters was 2.8224, multiplied by the middle range of the ideal body mass for a male at 22.5, 63.5 kilos. There it is to clarify all of that. Okay. So I need 2 grams of protein per that. So that's going to be 126 grams of protein or so. Let's use 125 for the easy math because calculators don't work when you have mouse buttons that don't work. And what you end up with there would be, well, what you then have to do is take that weight in protein and multiply it by 4 to get a weight of meat because meat is not all protein. 3/4 of it is not. All right. So that's what we come out with. So we'd say 126 grams of protein per day multiplied by 4 is basically just on a kilo, isn't it? something like that. These days, I just do it visually. I go, that's about as much meat as it needs to be. But if I needed somewhere to start, that's what it would be. And then people say, well, how much fat and what's the fat ratio to the protein and all that? To which I just go, well, you start eating when you feel hungry. You make sure you eat that much protein and you eat the fat that's with it. And if you're still hungry after that, you eat some more fat until you feel like you don't want to eat anymore.
And I think that that's the big key question there, right? That a
Yeah,
lot of people are always asking about fat. It's about how much fat do I eat? How much fat do I eat? But
yeah,
I've heard this from a lot of other people. Protein is the key. You got to get that correct first.
right. And I probably said a kilo. I think I said a kilo before. It's half a kilo. 4 times 1.25, isn't it? Come on, son. Get with the program. All right, so half a kilo, about a pound, not a kilo, a pound. There or thereabouts. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Good.
Let's say that we're eating this in one meal,
Yep.
right? Because
Yep.
that's the way that you probably should be doing it, at least as a male. But
Mm.
let's talk a little bit about this. I hear a lot from females that it's better for them to eat 2 meals a day, particularly with their cycle. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I would never argue with a lady, Brian, about such things at all. I wouldn't dare. Um, yeah, look, there are differences between men and women. Believe it or not, there are actual differences between men and women in terms of things like hormones and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, there are valid arguments out there that some women will swear by, and some women will say this works better for me. I've always said to people, whether they be men or women, if something is working for you, that would be a sign that that's a thing that ain't broke, ergo does not need fixing. So let's not go fixing things that ain't broke. If you are either a man or a woman who finds 2 meals a day is more convenient, more doable for you, and you are weight stable if that's your goal, or you're gaining weight in terms of muscle mass if that's your goal, or you are losing fat mass if that's your goal, if it's all going according to plan, then it's not broken, is what I'm saying. What I'm talking about again is the middle of that curve. What is probably most likely to be ideal for most people.
Is there any concern with um, not eating enough protein if you're doing 2 meals a day that you're not temporarily kicking yourself out of ketosis?
Well, the only way to find that out is to try it and to see what happens over the next 3 or 4 weeks. If you're having a problem in that regard, the most likely things that you're going to notice are going to be things like muscle twitches, almost certainly in the legs and usually at night time. Possibly you might experience some mild palpitations of the heart. You might have difficulty sleeping or relaxing. Those would be the most obvious signs that you would sense. And you'll also be probably a bit thirsty. And you'll have a strange sense that you fancy salt. I want salt. If you're not experiencing any of those things and your body composition is doing what you want it to do or is moving in the direction you want it to at large, again, let's not fix that. But if you notice any of those things are happening, then what we might need to do is pull some of the protein out of one of your meals and bring it into the other one, leaving the other one a higher fat, less protein, and probably less energy dense meal. And then if we get that happening, we might just make that meal progressively smaller over time and the other one progressively bigger until you are eating 1 meal a day anyway. We will get you. You will comply, basically, is what I'm saying. I'm the science. Trust me, safe and effective, basically. Yeah. Don't question the science. Um, all of that's a joke for those of you that didn't get that, of course. Yeah. So that's what Brian's talking about there. The idea that we should eat 1 meal a day, ideally, is under the idea that it is important to cause an insulin spike in your blood when you eat sufficient to prevent your kidneys from becoming leaky for basically electrolytes that you get from various salts. Also has an effect on your thyroid function over time as well if you don't get this done. So that's what we're talking about. Well, let's get most of your protein in one. If you're going to eat 2 meals a day, fine, but let's get most of your protein in one of those, is what I'm saying.
What you were kind of explaining, I think a lot of people are going to say, well, I just need to take electrolytes and that'll take care of it.
Right.
So what's your take on that?
Well, that's like saying you've got a holy bucket, you just need to pour more water into it to keep the level of water up in that bucket without ever dealing with the fact that you've got holes in your bucket. Let's seal those, and then you don't need to keep pouring water into it all the time. I guess is the simplest way of putting it.
So when you first get started on the carnivore diet, would you say, I know that we both kind of think along the same lines here, where it's not good to just jump straight into it, but would you say that along with just easing in terms of slowly changing from whatever high carbs you were eating before, is it also good to, if let's say you were eating 3 or 4 times a day, to start there and slowly go down? So let's say
Yeah.
you decided I'm going to go to 1 meal a day.
Mm.
What would be the best way to ramp to that?
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's not a good idea to change your diet hugely from anything to anything else suddenly overnight. You don't just go changing your diet wholesale like that. That's a bad idea. That'll upset your microbiome almost certainly. It can cause quite significant problems. It can be lasting for many, many months, actually. And it's just, you might get away with it too. There are people that get away with it completely. Oh, I changed my diet overnight. It was great. Everything was fixed 3 minutes before I did it. And we're like, well, fantastic. Good for you. Most people will have a problem. So let's just not do that. Basically, it's for me, it's about okay, let's say you're having 3 meals a day. Well, you're gonna in the first week, you're gonna have 2 meals, and the third one's gonna be like more like a snack. Then you're gonna drop that out the next week, and you're gonna have 1 meal, and the second one's gonna be a half-size one. And then you go another week doing that. And so it's like a stepwise ramp, if you like, so that you don't have to sit down and plan every micro day for the next 6 weeks, because who wants to do that? So it's really just a matter of like taking about a third of that which is a problem out and replacing it with something else if you need to. Most people that are eating 3 meals a day don't need to replace the food in those 3 meals because most of the stuff they're eating in 3 meals a day, I can guarantee you, Brian, is not food. It's going to be nonsense. It's going to be completely inappropriate non-food substances that are marketed to humans as food. That stuff which is made of plants is what I'm talking about. That's not food for you. So we don't need to replace that so much. Once we get our protein from muscle meat and associated fat intakes to the right levels, you don't need anything else nutritionally. So we can get rid of the plants progressively over time from there. That's probably a good program.
Would you say that there are certain plant-based materials that would be best to use as on your migration downward? Obviously, you don't want to be eating Twinkies and ho-hos and stuff like that, but
No,
what would
no.
be the best thing to eat to transition?
Well, the so-called least problematic of the plant materials. Again, this is quite individual too, Brian, because some people
It's
react
hard,
really
huh?
bad. Yeah, it is. Some people react really badly to fruit,
Yeah.
others don't. Some people react really badly to wheat, others don't. Rice, same deal. Potatoes, same deal. None of them are food for human beings. They're all things that are completely unnecessary. Um, but which one is best for you to use as that thing that you're using to ramp down on? That's going to be n equals one a bit too. I would probably say the best way to do it, and the way I would normally suggest, is that a person would use that which they have been eating and ramp that stuff down and just prioritize some of that. So, like if you've got seed oils in your diet, for example, they've got to go yesterday. That's the first thing you get out of there. Following that, it would be sugars and overtly sugary stuff. The third most important thing is going to be all other carbohydrates, starches, that kind of stuff, and fiber, probably in that order for the average person. Again, your mileage will vary and your priorities may not match what I've just listed. That's just an off the top of my head sort of a probably that way.
So I want to change gears a little bit and talk about a product that we both support called Stem Enhance Ultra.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people will say that they feel so much better from eating the carnivore diet and so forth.
Hmm.
And you know, they will even say that there are things that have healed and so forth. They
Sure.
they recover quicker and all that
Mm.
kind of stuff.
Mm.
Stem Enhanced Ultra kind of takes that like a step further because of what it does with your stem cells. And wondered if we could kind of dive into that a little deeper about how important your stem cells are
Mm.
and what exactly Stem Enhance Ultra can do for your stem cells to improve things even better than what the carnivore diet can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Stem Enhance Ultra is the flagship product of the Cerule company, and as Brian said, he and I both are joint ventured with the Cerule company. We do support and promote their products, and rightly so. The reason for that being that this product does something the carnivore diet cannot do, and that is that it's a nutraceutical. So it's not a nutrition supplement, although it's labeled as a nutrition supplement because the FDA requires it to be labeled as such. Doesn't mean it is one. There are one or two things in it that might be nutritionally useful to people that have shortages of those things. But that's not the point. The point is it has an active ingredient that has a specific effect, and that is it causes your bone marrow to release your adult stem cells, which have your DNA in them, and they float around in your blood until they find tissues in your body that are tired, worn out, diseased, in need of replacement and repair, basically. And that's what these guys do. They bind to that tissue, they differentiate into a brand new cell of the kind required, clean up all the detritus, recycle what can be recycled, package up everything that can't be for the rubbish, if you like, for the garbage. And that's the process. It's brilliant. It's outstanding. It's a normal, natural thing for your body to renew and repair itself that way. However, we are programmed by our genes to age, and part of that process is that our ability to release the adult stem cells drops over the years. Isn't that terrible? Well, the Stem Enhanced Ultra product releases that limitation. It counteracts that trend. Isn't that great? Um, and Brian will tell us his link as to where they can get it.
Wick.cerule.com,
There you go.
WICK dot
Mhm.
cerule.com.
There it is. That's where you go. That's where you get it from. Fabulous. Okay, so that's why it's so good because, well, we're not allowed to call it Fountain of Youth. So I usually say it's not a Fountain of Youth. That way I've said Fountain of Youth three times in the last 5 or 6 seconds without ever claiming this is Fountain of Youth is number four, you see? Because we're not allowed to say Fountain of Youth five.
You know, an experience I had with it kind of touches on the whole thing I was talking about with where you feel great with doing the carnivore diet, but then this even enhances. We had a big snowstorm some years back and shoveling up on top of the car, I hurt my shoulder and it was bad for I don't know 5 6 years. When I moved to the carnivore diet, about a year in, I could definitely say it was better. Before I couldn't move my shoulder up at all, and I was able to move it up with some pain, but I was able to move it up. And this was after about a year, good year of doing the carnivore diet. That's when I decided to start taking Stem Enhance Ultra, and within a couple of months, it was much better to go up like all the way. And now I have complete motion, everything, no pain at all. So it just shows how it enhances the what you're going to get with the carnivore diet. Because with the carnivore diet, you're you're not eating those foods that cause inflammation and so forth. So it's going to take away some of the pain and all that. But then you actually, with this product, you're, improving your stem cell count within your body, and the stem cells are able to go out and repair and replicate those but damaged cells. So that's when the real magic happens, so to speak.
For sure, absolutely. On top of the stem cell release agent, we've also got an anti-inflammatory and a blood flow optimizer. You should probably get all three products together in a pack. They're all highly synergistic and work together to optimize the effect. You'll get 18 to 20% discount for getting them in a wellness pack, so that's definitely the way to go. And if you're interested in getting that for free, just let Brian know. We've got a program for that too.
Last thing that I wanted to kind of talk about here um, has to do with uh, more of the exercise portion of things, right? So a lot of
Mm,
people that are coming to the carnivore diet, they are, I'll use myself as an example. When I came to carnivore diet a little over 2 years ago, I was way overweight. I was out of shape. I had different health issues, health conditions, and so forth. And exercise was really the last thing that I wanted to do.
mm,
Um, so I want you to touch a little bit about that. Like, when's the best time to add in exercise, depending on where you are, obviously health-wise and so forth.
mm,
Um, is it really a problem to do exercise when you're still needing to heal your
mm,
body?
mm,
And of course, we want to define that exercise because we don't want to talk about cardio. We want to talk about the thing that's really going to help you, right?
mm.
With, um, you know, have, strenuous activity, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's it. And you've hit the nail on the head there. You want to basically, anyone that tells you you want to do hours and hours of cardio every week is not someone you want to listen to. That's not what you want to be doing exercise-wise at all, in fact. The idea with exercise is that it comes in two forms. One is incidental activity, which is very, very low intensity in general. The kind of stuff you could do for hours and hours and still hold a conversation doing, like walking or very low intensity cycling or that kind of stuff. Or the other kind of exercise is the kind that's actually a training stimulus, the kind that's actually useful to improve your physical capacities, your fitness, your interaction with the world, and the thing that will actually affect your body composition, more muscle and less fat, which will be a good thing. So it's the high intensity stuff. It's the burst repeat activities, HIIT style training, or resistance training, either with fixed weights or with variable resistance, i.e., rubber band style stuff, much like the X3 bar from John Jackish. There you go, John. Sorted. Um, all good methodologies. So, and it's all relative to your capacity. So you do have to take your physical fitness into account as to the absolute level of these activities. However, so long as it's relative to your capacity near your top end, that's what we're looking for. You will need to worry about things like impact sometimes, especially if you're very overweight, in which case there are non-weight bearing options until you lose some of that overtly too much weight that you're going to do damage to yourself if you try and do much impact work. Um, so there are options there, either with your body supported by water, which also provides resistance to activity, which is handy, and or things like cycling and rowing and things like that are things that you're not carrying your body mass and there's no impacts to speak of. So those are all options. Um, that's basically it. In terms of the weight level we're talking about, what I'm suggesting is two working sets of around about 8 repetitions using a fixed weight. And the weight should be such that you can lift it 8 times, but the ninth one would be a bit much. You'd fail. So it's called an 8 rep maximum load. And that's relative to your strength, whatever it is now. So it's the same advice. It'll just be different absolute weights for different people.
So here's something that I've heard from, well, I won't say who, but somebody in my family. I'll put
Uh-huh.
it that way.
Uh-huh.
They when I said that they should lift weights and do different things like that, she
Hmm.
says, "I'm a female. I don't want to have big muscles."
Right.
So
Well, that's
could you
lucky.
touch
It's
on that?
lucky then. That's very lucky because when you see a woman who's highly muscled, she's on the gear. Even those ones that tell you she's not, yes, she is. The same way that you see a bloke that's huge like that, yes, he's on the gear. It's not a natural state of being. It's not something you can achieve without maximizing everything, including taking the gear. You will not build huge, bulky muscles as a female by lifting relatively heavy weights in the style that I'm talking about. It will just tone you up, and the extra energy that's being used to keep the extra muscle mass polarized, so called, will be enough to basically strip some extra fat off your body as well, 24/7, 365. So that's kind of the ideal. Yeah, you're not going to end up looking like a female Arnie. It's just not going to happen.
Something you just mentioned about stripping the fat, and I know you've talked about this before, so I think it's important in this video to hear it again. Um, what would you say is the best way to lose body fat quickly?
Gain muscle mass. The thing is, a muscle cell at rest needs to pump a whole bunch of ions across the membrane one way and the other to set up this thing called a resting membrane potential so that that muscle cell can be activated to contract. Those pumps that pump those ions have to run 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the whole time, basically. That takes energy. That energy is supplied by oxidizing fat that you had stored on your body. So long as you don't consume so much massive food that you still stay where you are. So you need to watch that as well. It's a program of um, consuming enough mass that you have the nutrient on board you need to do what you need to do, but not so much as your body stores it. This is a mass in, mass out equation, basically. And that's affected by hormones, as we've spoken about, and the endocrine system, and a whole bunch of things, which way your metabolism is running, because it's geared to run one way or the other, build up or break down. So what we're talking about is the intake of food over time as compared to the use of energy over time averaged, not what's going on at any one given tick of the clock, because that's a very complex thing. So that's basically it. And like if someone says, oh, I've got too much body fat, I want to lose some, I'm going to put them on a program of anti-inflammatory lifestyle because it's very, very difficult to lose fat if you are inflamed. Your body protects you from doing so. It's one of the times that your hormones and endocrine system and stuff gets geared in such a way as to prevent it. So the first thing with getting weight off someone is dealing with their inflammation in the background. So we do that using a 5 point approach. And there's a video on my channel where it's called 5 health hacks you need to know, and I'm doing that on the thumbnail if you want to watch that one. I'll run through them quickly for you if you like. They are 100% carnivore diets, raw products, the three we spoke about earlier. Electrical grounding and earthing as much of the time as possible, blocking blue light from your eyes after dark, and high intensity burst repeat and or resistance training. Those are my 5. And as part of number 5, we build some muscle mass as well. So we hit it from both sides. That's how we get the fat off somebody over time. And it's not a straight line thing, by the way. It's a program where sometimes we have to do the work first and then we get the result rather than the other way around. So that's how I would approach it. I've had quite a bit of success with clients over the years with that approach. So again, it's one of those things that for me works and ergo doesn't need fixing. So yeah, there are other approaches too. There are many ways to skin a cat, but that's the way I use it. It's the way that works for me.
and you mentioned clients.
Mm.
So I know that you do consulting. So why don't you let everybody know how would be the best way to contact you if they want to hire you as a coach?
Sure, if you'd like me to do some coaching with you, some consulting with you, I do that via membership to a Patreon page. It's a monthly subscription. It is also a carousel. You jump on and off whenever you feel like it's time. When you've got what you need from me, jump off. Sure, make the spot available for someone because there are only available, X number of spots that I can consult during the week. The best way to find it is just to type bit.ly Bart, B-A-R-T hyphen K-A-Y. And that'll take you to a page where you can click join my Patreon. And from there, you can work it out. There are two or three different tiers that you can join. They're called discussion tiers. And they're basically on a first in, first dressed basis. It's the same product, but as tiers fill, you have to then jump to the next more expensive tier. And then there are three tiers. And when they're all full, that's it. I've got no more room. Sorry. So that's how it works.
Well, Bart, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for doing the interview today.
Pleasure.
And I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this. So thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. Cheers.